Hi guys, what up, Viper here, and today I want to talk a little bit about esports in general, like how it's done, what are the goals of it, then how do you do it in the Illuvium games, because it seems like that this is the current focus and what Illuvium wants to be doing, so I'll give a really good example on that. I wrote down some bullet points before the video started, right, before I started recording, and what's the main thing, right? Esport is a marketing tool, right? That's the first thing. The first misconception maybe from a lot of Web3 things where it's just like, please company, give us money in this way. Yeah, just make tournaments and give us prize money. So what are essentially the angles that you wanna get with esport, right? I mean, one is essentially you indirectly sponsor people to play and create content for your game. For example, Parallel is the prime thing in Web3 when it comes to getting this really well. I think they've onboarded so many top talent players from Hearthstone by, I think some of them are essentially paid, yeah, obviously, but most of them aren't, or in like a very minuscule way. Most of them actually are just like, it's a good game and it's a really good esport program. That's why they want to play the game and that's why they want to create content for the game and so on and so on. So Parallel is essentially spending a bunch of money on esport, but in reality, they just have onboarded a bunch of this top level talent. I don't think they've onboarded a bunch of like players with it yet. The player numbers didn't seem to skyrocket, but they've done the first part really well. Very good working example of that. And then the second thing, this is, I think in Hearthstone, for example, this was a very real thing, that the esports side of things, which included like really low entry, low barrier of entry tournaments online where somebody could just sign up and they could have this idea of maybe I just have a good day and I just win it all. Something like that. So it gave a lot of people this end game where you can get better and better in the game. You can reach higher and higher ranks. And for some people, once they hit legend, it was like, well, I've played through the game. The game is over, right? But no, there are tournaments that you can play. You can still get better at the game. You can learn more decks for those different tournaments and so on and so on. So that is just the second thing that usually this whole like esport thing on a marketing tool is, right? Like once it buys you like the sponsored content kind of thing. And like the third point here, right, it creates a lot of marketable content and clips and such. I, for example, still remember playing League of Legends in the early days and Faker 1v1 Z crazy outplay at Worlds, right? So then there's a couple caveats on that, right? The first one is the game needs to be high enough agency so that the people who are like top tier level content creators, which are like maybe top 1% level players, and then the people who are actually professional players in the sense of making a living through competing. So if you tell them your game has a bunch of like coin flips where, well, they can just lose to somebody who's far worse than them, you'll not get those people to play your game, right? It's like, again, the parallel side of things where I feel like the game has really good amount of agency because the esports setup and the extra formats and rules and such that they implemented is really A tier. There's like a fair criticism, there's like some fair criticism points to their system as well. I think most of it is on like the MMR system on ladder and such, but the actual tournaments really nothing to say about that top tier level. And then on the second part, right, like give like some kind of end game reason for people to like play, and essentially when I mean play, also buy more assets, buy more cards, buy different decks and try all of those things out. It needs to be somewhat like an actual path, so you do progress, right? It's like you reach the next rank, you learn the next deck, you learn the next thing, you learn the next genre in the game, like control, aggro, mid-range, something like that, whatever like kind of game you're playing, right? And then it needs to be relatively accessible on this way, right? So maybe something like, okay, the next expansion I can buy this, or I get my next paycheck, put some money into this, and I have the next thing, next paycheck, I have the next thing, and so on and so on. So that accessible part is relevant. I think a lot of the times people try to over make like it has to be super cheap and it has to be super like free even. I don't think that is necessarily true, especially because Web3 and Illuvium is way closer to what trading card game monetization and economy looks like than what most online games essentially look like. And even if we want to compare to online games, we should be comparing to online card games where you need to own the card to play the deck. That is what I mean with accessible here, like the TCG and card game level thing, not, I don't know, free-to-play MOBA game or something like that. So yeah, if you do the high price pools, if you do high price pools that are just really inaccessible, right? If the game has a super high barrier of entry, then you're essentially only rebating the whales that can just access those things. I feel like that is a very Web3 thing to do at times, where it's just like, oh, you have like the most rare thing in the game and there's only like so many of them exist, so nobody else can beat you or something like that. I think that's like fair for like a short-term revenue boost and whatnot. I don't know how really scalable that is. So yeah, the scalability on that is, I think, the issue if you make it too inaccessible and you're just rebating the people who just spent a bunch of money. Then I think this is the next point that's really, really important to understand. Online games are usually made for a one-game experience and a high sample size of playing a high like time frames. That gives the agency in the game, right? So if you have 55% win rate every game, but you play hundreds of games, you will climb the ladder. And if you're better than everybody else and they only have 54% win rate, you will climb the ladder higher than those other people. Maybe you have a 60% win rate, right? Something like that. Like again, like the card game example, usually you have like the top players and top quality games, really tough to get like 60-65% in a best of one scenario in the average card game. If we talk about Web3 card games, sure, I can have like 70-80% win rate because the competition is far weaker than in top tier Web2 card games, right? So usually online game, well, a bit coin flippy, right? There's like some RNG events that happen in best of one especially. Therefore, you just play 100 games, 1,000 games per month, and then that RNG gets outpaced by the agency. That one guy has 60, the other guy 61, the other guy 59% and such. So this is important to understand because tournaments are on a low time frame. You cannot play 1,000 games in a tournament. In a tournament, you're gonna play like 1 or 2 days. Maybe you're gonna play, I don't know, 10 rounds of best of 3s or best of 5s. So you usually implement some extra rules that make up for the loss of that agency of being able to play hundreds of thousands of games. And then I think especially in the card game genre, there's a lot of extra rules that are very possible, ranging from like side decks, so like changing your deck between the rounds, like in best of 3, right? You play one game with the thing that you came in, and then the second and third game you can swap out cards with your side decks. Or what is more common in online card games is that you have to bring entirely different decks. So you bring like 4 different decks and you have a ban, and then you have to get a win on every deck that you brought. That's like the standard thing. Really, really good because you make up extra rules and suddenly the better player has a way, way higher chance of winning, and what you keep the time frame that is needed to decide who is winning still pretty low. So this brings us to Illuvium Ascendant Arena, right? Ascendant Arena is very similar to like a TCG, a CCG online card game setup, right? You essentially build your deck, it's called a team here, and then you go and play a 1v1. Like I talked about in the recent video, right, currently it lacks like agency and the skill ceiling is super, super low in my opinion. It is very easy to get to a point where especially the better players are just like flipping coins every game because there's only so much that you can have decisions on. And it's like very easy to see all of those and essentially either make the correct one if there is one, or if the decision is a pure coin flip, then yeah, you just flip a coin. But it has been confirmed that it's getting reworked, right? So I have high hopes that this will get better. Now, for essentially how do you do esport in this, like I've already alluded to, you usually, this is like super similar to like a card game setup, so you should just be copying the system that is proven for like a decade in online card games at this point, right? Formats like playing Conquest. Conquest format in card games means you submit multiple different decks and you have to get a win with every single deck. So you cannot get away just having one good deck. You have to be able to play multiple good decks, and you also usually want to have a strategy, like everybody is going to play this thing, so I should try to play a lot of stuff that's really good versus that. Or I have a ban and all of my things are weak versus this one specific thing, so even though on the online ladder these things suck because everybody is playing this really strong thing, now I can ban it and they have to play different stuff, so I can now bring all of these other things and so on. That gives a really, really high skill ceiling and a lot of agency to the better players to figure out, okay, what can I play? How is this different to the 1v1 online ladder format? One thing to mention on the Ascendant Arena, right, the game is essentially pay to play, right? On the like part of esports where it's like how accessible is this and so on. I think this is very much Ascendant Arena. You just need to own like one copy of everything. Doesn't matter what random stat modifiers or levels or anything like that. Just need one baseline copy of everything. This is pretty much just in line in what a normal like card game is. like a normal Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, One Piece, Hearthstone, right? Something like that. Oh yeah, that's like one really interesting thing to note, because obviously you want to use esports as a marketing tool to promote people to like buy stuff in your game to some extent. In something like a Conquest format where people have to play multiple different decks and there's like extra rules and restrictions and so on, you will see a way bigger variety of things that people bring to the tournament, which essentially promotes those decks, those playstyles, those combos, those things to a wide audience of players that then might go, oh, I really want to play this as well. So that's like a really good marketing side effect of like playing actually real esport formats, right? All right, then we have Gauntlet. The Gauntlet game mode, right, is just a classic 8-player battle royale auto battler. So you have 8 people load into the game, and if you do like an esports setting on those games, so far it's usually been, well, you just play multiple lobbies with all those 8 players, and then you give them points, like the first guy gets 8, the last guy gets 1. It should really be like the first gets 8, the second 7, and so on and so on. Giving like a higher emphasis for like first or something like that is relatively stupid, in the sense that it doesn't reward a skillful, consistent play. It more or less rewards getting lucky. Because in an 8-player lobby, getting first usually means to some extent you got lucky. Even if you're the best player in the world, you can never consistently get first place in that 8-player lobby. So that should be the important thing that should be just kept in mind, right? Where you want to reward consistency and good play and good outcomes. You don't want to increase the RNG, you want to increase the agency that players have, you want to reward players consistently doing well in competitions, because you play this low sample size of only a couple of games within like a day or within a weekend or something like that. Then the second tough part on the esports side of things in these battle royale 8-player things is to make sure that you encourage sportsman-like behavior, because let's say you play 6 games, but by the end of the 5th game, there's only, I don't know, 2 people that can get first place, and there's like 1 person that's guaranteed last place. Well, why should that person who's currently guaranteed last place even play that game, even want to play that game? They are like essentially encouraged, oh, they play one of their friends maybe is one of the top 2 guys, so they should like do everything in their power to harm the guy that's not their friend or something like that. So this is the tough part here, and this is a tough part in a lot of esports settings, but especially in this battle royale thing, because in the 1v1 setting, there's usually like, yeah, if you keep playing in the tournament, you win. There's probably something that you can win if you win the game. Here, sometimes there really isn't anything, so that can be a tough issue to overcome. I think we've recently seen in Teamfight Tactics in the recent worlds, one of the players essentially suggests that the Chinese players were win trading. I don't know like how verified it is or whatnot. Riot obviously didn't like ban any of the Chinese players or take any actions, but it is really, really hard to prove this as well. So that is the tough side on the esport here. Then a second negative thing, again, if you compare to like the 1v1 kind of game, here it's like, I don't know, you just show them the game, it's high-level gameplay, it's a lot of different decks and strategies and things that are happening, cool, right? Encourages people to essentially play the game and buy new stuff so that they can play the game, because they need to own the stuff to play the game. Here, it is a bit tougher for like a streaming side of things, because you can't follow 8 players around at the same time. So you kind of just follow 1 player around, or maybe you hop from one to another. So the way that this is broadcasted oftentimes is just that most of the players who are playing broadcasting their own side of things, and then they just have their own audience watching this, which is really good in the sense of having your community and streamers and people who play competitively grow on the content side of things. Just due to the fact that, well, maybe people want to watch the guy who's currently doing well in the tournament, and there's the live stream of that guy, and then they go there and they go and follow the dude and so on. So that is the positive here, where it's less about the main broadcast, but the esports side of things also just encourages people to create this content and increase their followings and such. Now, my takes on Leviathan and Leviathan game modes when it comes to competitive and esports, right? So the barrier to entry for Leviathan game modes is completely crazy, in my opinion, on a competitive level. Because the top-end competitive scene doesn't mean that something, like I've seen people be like super happy about, oh man, this is a great Leviathan Illuvia, and it has like a 250%, 240%, and a 30% stat line. Well, the other guy is going to have 50% on everything and you're screwed. Like that's the reality of things. I think for Leviathan, if you really want to play top-end Leviathan, ranked ladder and competition stuff, you would need everything 50% and the highest level on that Illuvium, which is incredibly difficult to get because you can't even filter for it on the Illuvium decks yet. You can't even buy it if you want to. You cannot buy experience points for the Illuviums. You still have to go out and farm them, or you have to hire people to do this. So like probably not even that many of those exist. It's super, super inaccessible. And like I said, people can't even just filter and go and buy it all because those filters don't exist yet. Then the better player can beat the worst player with the better deck. I think that's like a kind of like a bullshit take. If you want to take the comparison to trading card games, it's like to some extent it is true, yes, but I cannot give. But if I give like somebody who's a top 10% player, like a deck where the cards have like 20% more attack damage and 20% more health, yeah, which is like the card, like one card, I don't know, one card is like a 10-10 and the other guy has a 12-12. I don't know. I can be the better player and I can make a lot of smart decisions and whatnot, but I'm probably not gonna beat the guy with the better deck more than 50% of the time. Because at some point the skill difference isn't that crazy if the other guy just has the higher power level units or cards or something like that. So I think this is like a very romanticized take that's like not super real in my opinion when it comes to the top end of things. It's like, yeah, I can have like 10-20% worse on everything. Maybe I can still get, I don't know, top 100, top 50 with that. But getting like top 10, rank 1, I don't know, man. Like that's like not a real take. So it's like a very Web3 whale game mode, and in theory could be accessible via the borrowing assets kind of thing and so on. I also think that this is like more or less like a kind of like a BS take, because the borrowing assets side, it is such a high counterparty risk because you need these to actually play the game, right? It's not like in other games where you just have them for earning potentials or something like that. Here, you need them to actively play the game. So like, what do you do if you qualify for like the tournament and then the guy is like, yeah, I don't know, just give them back to me, I give them to the other player. Or I take them back because I want this other guy to win. Like what do you do, right? So I think there's a lot of counterparty risk here involved on essentially both sides, even because maybe I don't know. Let's like not dive deeper into this. I think it's just pretty inaccessible essentially, and there's some risk factors involved. So I think it's more of this like romanticized Web3 gaming take where you tell this to like a normal competitor in like any mainstream game, they're gonna be like, I don't know, man, it's kind of weird. And I know how borrowing assets in like real world trading card games is very normal, but if I compare how easy and accessible this is, like when I would go and borrow people Yu-Gi-Oh cards at tournaments, they would tell me what they want. I would like put it on the table, make a photo of it, and then give them the cards. And then, I don't know, at some point I look at the photo and I'm like, oh, okay, this guy owes me these things, and I take them back. It currently is a lot more of a hurdle than that, in my opinion. Okay, so how do I fix this? What's like my take on this? In my opinion, you should be able to qualify for Leviathan tournaments via online ladder. I don't think that online ladder should be giving you direct cash rewards. Well, online ladder giving you direct cash rewards kind of comes back to the initial point where I said it's just a rebate for whales. It's not actually rewarding competition. It's not actually rewarding skill. Like to some extent, yes, but to a big extent, it's just a rebate for whales with, sure, but how scalable is that? How accessible is that for other people to be like, maybe this could be me. Maybe I could get into this. So I think that you should just be able to qualify to events via online ladder, because then maybe top 50 is enough, maybe top 100 is enough, top 200, top 500, right? You can like downgrade that number further and further, like however many players you have in the game, essentially, like whatever makes sense currently. And then all of a sudden, like, yeah, maybe the guy who has the 250, 240, 130% alluvial is a really, really good player, and they can make top 100, even though the other guys have everything 50% and 5 levels higher or something like that. Like at that point, you can make this romanticized take like a reality, essentially. Because sure, the whales have an easier time to get into the tournament, but you can also get into the tournament. And once you play the tournament, I think that everybody should just be given a super account that is only tournament usable, right? No tradable assets, nothing like that. But just an account where they all have the same stuff, everything is perfect, everything is high level, and then you play this like top-end Leviathan competition on a top-end competitive level that is actively fair, and you probably have the best odds for the best players to win. And it's also just like watchable and castable, because the narrative is not, well, this guy just has stuff that's like, this guy has a 12-12 and the other guy has a 10-10, so like, what do you say as a caster to that? It's like, yeah, so this guy has the card that's worth $1,000 and the other guy's card is worth $100. So it's like not a great viewing or watching experience, and it doesn't really make it seem like it is accessible for anyone. And it also is probably not super interesting for like the content creator or player side of things, because how do you make content about it? Like, yeah, I spent the most money, therefore I spent the most money and I'm slightly better, or I'm even slightly worse than the other people, but they didn't spend as much money. It's like not cool. Okay, so this took like pretty long to get here, but how would I do, for example, a Gauntlet esport start? What's like my take on this after I've given just overall thoughts on just what is esport, what to do with it, how can it work on the Illuvium games that we currently have, right? So I think the funding part of this is, it probably just makes sense to allocate a certain amount of tokens from this monthly airdrop towards a competitive thing. And I think with this, you can also essentially justify that you don't use all the 30k tokens in the current months, which is like very bear market and low prices, and sentiment is like kind of screwed anyways and so on. So you can kind of justify reasonably to take this for the future, for like bigger events, and you have a start, you start the road to qualify for those bigger events. I think that would make a lot of sense. Then I think essentially the first stage of this, you should just like start weekly tournaments like normal Gauntlet and Leviathan. I think both modes should be played in these weekly tournaments, and top some number. I mean, I wrote down 4 here as like question mark, right? But like cool. Maybe top 4 people from both of those tournaments weekly, they qualify for the next stage. Then I don't know, I wrote this out in a bullet point here, right? Like important, make non-exploitable rules, fair rules, none up to interpretation, no short-term judgment calls, and so on and so on. And like why? Web3 looks literally shady to even the people in it, because there's so much like insider knowledge and favoritism, and most people are just here to make money to some extent or another, which currently means like PvPing with each other and trying to dump coins or NFTs or whatever on each other and so on. It's like bear market sentiment is like not great and so on, right? So I think especially like not even Web 2 is gonna scrutinize you if you have like a shitty esports system, but Web 3 is gonna probably entirely take you apart if you have a esports system that unironically is to some extent exploitable, to some extent unfair, or can be perceived as unfair, has things up to interpretation, is laid out to favor certain groups of people, is laid out to favor people with insider knowledge, has things up to interpretation, doesn't adhere to sportsman-like standards or anything like that. I think you open such an annoying can of worms of being completely taken apart, like in the space, by people who just don't like Illuvium, right? For whatever rational or irrational reasons that they have, that you really, really want to avoid this, and you really have to pay attention that this rule set is like waterproof and fair and perfect. Not essentially unlike we've seen so far by a lot of the community organized things. People are really, really optimistic about the thing that they currently like, and when you ask them about why do you like it, okay, and then they give you some metrics, and then why do you not like Illuvium, and they give you some answers, and based on the metrics, the game that they like is like 10 times worse on just numbers, but they still like it sentiment-wise. That's why you really cannot give people openings to make super, super negative comments that have like some truth to it, I think. That's why this is really important, in my opinion, when you want to do esport and competitive stuff. So yeah, my take is like, right, just like start weekly things so you can play on the weekly current patches, and the game can get better weekly, right? So that is important, but you also reward essentially people for just playing right now, because maybe there's not that many people involved. Maybe the game isn't really high agency right now. Maybe it can get a lot better, but your competition probably currently is just not going to be as great. And I mean, well, 4 people gonna be like 4 or maybe 2 or maybe 8, like however many you want, right, are gonna get like a qualifier spot for like the second stage. I think this should only be like small prizes each week or something like that, until you feel like the game is just at a state where you can justify doing bigger stuff with it. And then I would say also on the, like, when you feel like the game is ready and it's doing well, right, you just keep doing this for like a certain amount of months until game is good enough to just have a big event where you feel like you can really invite a lot of top-end players from maybe around Web 3, maybe around Web 2, and just have them play it and have them be like, yeah, this is actually a good game. So I would say that you have essentially a stage 2 before you have this final big thing, right? To reduce the amount of qualified people down to like whatever number you deem makes sense, right? This could be like a 32, 64, 128, something like that. Also kind of depends on how many people you want to have qualified per week and for how many months this would be going on, right? So I think, what like game modes should this be played in? That's a tough question, right? I think you can just play it in the normalized Gauntlet thing, or you can just give everybody super accounts for just fair competition. But I think at this stage, it would make a lot of sense to already have it be a fair competition, because you probably don't want people who are really, really bad, essentially, at the final stage of the event, because it's just going to be a really poor showing of, man, that guy really, really sucks. How did that guy even qualify for this event? And then the answer is like, oh yeah, he just played like a $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, however much like a full Leviathan collection will cost, right? I think that would be a bad showing to especially the like potentially Web 2 and TFT talent and viewers that you would have at that event, right? Now, the interesting thing on like how do you get like players, TFT streamers and such invited and interested in like maybe the main event kind of thing, or maybe just invite them to like the second stage and they also have to go through and qualify like what is like deemed reasonable at that time of the being, or what like the player/streamers agree to, or maybe you have like 2 tiers of player/streamers that you invite, and so on, right? The interesting part is if you cut down to a low enough amount of players on the second stage, you can probably just be like, yeah, everybody gets a X amount of tokens minimum prize money for having made it to the final stage of the event. And that is this indirect sponsored content kind of thing where you probably don't have to go and spend company runway on the marketing money for getting those people. You can just have them invited and have given them like an easier path essentially to qualify for this, which we can argue, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Is this fair? Is this not fair? I think it makes a lot of sense on the whole marketing aspect of things, especially if this is like the first bigger thing maybe that you want to make. And I think it makes total sense to give like some privileged, easier path to that main event to those people. And if like the Illuvium players would think, man, they suck, why are they even allowed to play in this? Hey, then you just booked a lot of easy opponents in the tournament, so you should be happy about that as well, if you feel like that they suck and they are really easy to beat for you. So this shouldn't be really a concern from the players who managed it through the qualifier phase, right? So yeah, then you just like have some kind of main event of like however many qualified people you want, plus the invited ones. I think, again, here it makes a lot of sense to play this with like Leviathan Arena super accounts, where you have a fair competition, but you are showing off like these high level and strong Illuviums because they kind of look cooler, honestly, when they fight. Like they cast their abilities more frequently, they attack faster and so on. Like, it doesn't look cool, right? It's a different meta game and so on. We'll have to see in the future on how different it is, I would say, and so on and so on. But I think it would make sense to have this just like super account Leviathan, or have everybody play on the non-pay-to-win normalized game mode, right? Then I wrote down some bullet points on this. I don't know, it just took like 5 minutes just writing this down, so I hope I'm not ranting on too much. But yeah, like the reasons I had noted for this, right, to just summarize this and the video up, I guess. Like this setup, for example, I think would be pretty accessible and it's pretty attractive for anybody who would compete in Web3 games as well. Like we see a lot of people probably be like Parallel right now. It's a very, very attractive esport currently and for the next few months. That's why I've started like playing that more aggressively in the recent weeks as well, because it is really attractive esports. It's really good prize money. It is a really well-made tournament format and so on. It is for good players, for skilled players, super attractive to go and play in that. And those super good and skilled players probably have some sort of following. So getting those to go and play your game is like very positive marketing thing, right? And I also think that especially on this, on like the first thing that you do, it is really good if you can qualify, not through like some 6 months things and every week gives points. And if you start in the 7th week, then you have no chance of beating the people who start in the 1st week. I think that really sucks. So that's why I suggested it's just like make the weekly thing and the top X qualify for the main event. So even if somebody just wants to play in the last week to qualify for like the second stage that then gives you to the main event, they can still do that and can still try to enter this. That's why I think it makes sense to try and keep it like somewhat accessible, and currently don't reward like the biggest grinders over that time frame, but try to just have it open to have as many like high level people be interested in join, and make it relatively easy for them to at least have a chance to join, right? The whole stage 2 thing, like I said before, right? You want to ensure that high quality players make it to the final thing, and not just somebody who maybe in the first few weeks, because there was no competition, or maybe there was a week where like very few signed up for the Leviathan thing or something like that, makes it, I don't think you want to have like people that just look really, really bad at this final thing. I think that's like just bad look. Don't want to have bad players at something that you sell as a high level competitive thing. And like I mentioned before, right, like this whole thing, for example, would give you an excuse to shift the rewards into the future, away from like bear market prices and sentiment and so on. I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, also last point I wrote down here, allows rewards when more relevant eyes are on the game, and indirectly might buy extra sponsored content, as TFT players might be happy with an invitation instead of having to be paid plus invited. Also, there's a note here. You probably get a lot of TFT players that are not like the thousands of viewer streamers, but like the hundreds or like 2-digit viewer streamers, to be like, wait, there's an auto battler. It's like a really easy entry esport kind of thing, and they have like a really big tournament at the end. I should go and play this. Because that is what happened with Peril, for example, again, where a lot of people from Hearthstone are like, this looks like a really easy esport thing that I can play in. It doesn't take too much time, and the competition is, well, I guess by now it's like pretty similar to what like Hearthstone currently would look like, but it initially would look like a lot easier than like top tier mainstream Web 2 game would currently be like. So you'll have something like, a lot of people are, damn, this looks really easy, and the more people you like catch with this looks really, really easy, then the more legit it looks, because you have caught a lot of legit people by it. And then at some point it's like, there's so many legit people inside of this, maybe I should also look into it. So yeah, it's a pretty long video at the end, but I think it's a pretty deep topic. Hope you guys appreciate this. I know it's not like it's not the how do you make money playing Illuvium kind of content and whatnot, but I don't know. I think it's good. It's informative. Give me your thoughts and ideas to this, guys. I appreciate all the feedback and what videos you want to see next, obviously. I definitely gonna make a video on like Gauntlet, on just, I don't know, what do I think, where do I think Gauntlet currently is, what do I think about changes that should happen and such. Obviously, some of it overlaps with the recent video about Arena. But yeah, I think it's worth talking about a little bit. Yeah, if you guys enjoy this content and want me to like keep making Illuvium content and streams and such, obviously I would appreciate if you use Viper as the referral link right on your Illuvium profile. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.